Alrighty, we're back again. It's been a little delayed, as per usual. It's dated stuff. I'm having to make repairs to laptops, computers, things like that, you know. But we get there. Right. Been a lot going on again, and there's a few things for me to go through to explain. I would go as far as to say as a little bit of an explanation of what's going on here and why. Before I do though, just a marginal correction and a bit of a humorous one as well. Oh look.
Rust.
That's right, Captain. High levels of ferric oxide. Corroded iron particles.
Would you mind telling me how iron could rust in space without oxygen?
I wish I could.
Mr. Paris, alter our course to follow that trail of rust.
I'm detecting a small object. It appears to be the source of the rust in hydrocarbons.
Put it on screen. Magnify.
Alrighty, we're right into that one then. Somebody had to do it somewhere, and it had to be a Trekkie. I said Discovery, but that's because it was the last series that I watched. It was. So I like all different types of stuff, sci-fi stuff, you know, and then the adventure into the parallels and different virtual universes and that. Just generally exploring what science, technology, research, is all up to, and what they're playing with. I've also been watching some of these programs, series and whatnot surrounding timelines of history and historical timelines of just humanity in that regards, human society and economics and all that, and how it all pans out. And this thing about the Earth, the solar system, galaxy, universe, aliens, all that type of stuff, and conspiracy stuff. As well as factual, don't get me wrong, as well as factual. Alrighty, so what we got? We got a few things. I'm going to try not to take up too much of your time, as always. Try and keep it within 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Takes up basically the one episode of a TV program, or just simply a TV program. Why else would you be here? TV's boring, so why not come and get a bit of information? Beyond that, when we talk about information, some of it's news, some of it's technology, some of it's politics, well, a lot of it's politics really, to be honest, given on what's going on in the climate of things and how all of this started, so we try and cover a great deal of stuff. Now, as part of a course, back in around about 2014, I made a few training videos. I did. And this is where this one comes from. As we mentioned in the last video, towards the end of it, about communication and perspectives. Now, we can either breeze across it or we can go deep. Right? But in this one, we are not necessarily going to breeze across it, because we kind of did that in the other videos. We call them training videos, but they're not. They're just kind of like information that's provided that you wouldn't normally get through the education system. You know what I mean. And from this one, it's kind of like, this is the segments to the series 2, which is going to be a little bit more complex, a little bit deeper. So it's going to be the same kind of like subject matters, contextually speaking, but just a little bit deeper. Yeah, we'll have a look at some of the perspectives. So, communication and perspectives. Right. Looking at reality, looking at the way the world works, intrinsic and extrinsic communication. Some of you by now will have realised there's something a little awkwardly real about all of this. Things seem to happen. Right? You'll find that it's based on the reason why this exists. Now, I don't go into it because I don't want to keep reminding people, and it's just there. However, within the first, from 2009 to around about 2010, so within the first year, and I was starting my mastery for management in that year, what I was doing was identifying the communication network. Right? Now, and what I mean by that is, talking about the communication network, generally speaking, everybody knows how the map lays out. America right through to backside of Russia, Australia. Yeah. It was important that I started from 0 point. Right? 0 point. No sense of favour. Just logically speaking, it made sense to start from 0. Right? i.e. the United Kingdom, GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. What that allowed me to do then, more so from an observer's point of view, is when I've watched things like social, political, economics, religious, environmental, and law activities, basically the pestle model, as some of you will know it as. Right? Once I've observed what's been going on, as is what I do now, what you've been observing through these videos, I give a feedback, i.e. this, which is like taking a pipette of dye, right, taking a glass of water and then dropping a bit of that dye in. And that's the feedback, pipette of dye. And the idea was to actually find out how quick information passes through the system. Right? So how quick do people in actual fact communicate, and how quick this information spreads? What it is, hence, and this will explain the reason why I go on a month-to-month basis, is because it takes approximately 2 weeks for the information to spread out across the network. Now some would say, well, if that's the case, then you do it 2 weekly. Yes and no. Primarily no. Because whilst information goes out, communication is about 2 aspects: talking and listening. Yeah, talking and listening. So the idea is, I talk, it takes 2 weeks to go out, then I listen, and that usually takes another approximate 2 weeks to then filter back through. So a month cycle. When we're talking about enacting of that information, if indeed people do enact or act on that information, it's about a matter of choice. If people decide that they're going to work with it, before that there's usually a bit of testing, which is where perspective comes in. Right? And again, we'll cover that in a moment. But it's where perspective comes in. Test it a little bit. Yeah, seems to be working. No, doesn't seem to work. Then that can take anywhere from, so we use that month, so we amplify that, it could take a year. It could take 2, maybe 3. It's taken approximately 7 years for some of the ideas that I've given out to actually come back with an answer. Yes? That's how slow the system can actually be. See, when you monitor these things, and let's say it's from an observer's point of view, when you put something out, it's how quick it comes back, if it indeed comes back at all. It's kind of like, as some of you tech heads will know, it's like pinging a network. You know this? Some of you hackers will know. It's about pinging a network. Yeah, there's response times, and so on and so forth. It's like, for those who are not tech savvy, it's like the difference between hitting your Explorer or Google Chrome or Firefox button and how long it takes for your browser, and that thing that pops up that you can browse the internet on, how long it takes for that browser to connect to the internet and bring the information back. Yeah? It's generally what goes on. And that happened within the first year. Based on that understanding, and everybody kind of come to understand that, yeah, it's, and accept that, yeah, it is pretty much the thing. Now we're beginning to understand and utilize communication and using communication appropriately. Now, you got to remember is that also works. Yeah, that also works within organisations. Now, some of the delays within the bigger picture is because on this particular map that I'm looking at, it has 192 flags. And it does. Even if I was to actually half that and call it 192, 86 thereabouts, isn't it? So, no, 96, sorry. Yeah, let's see. If I was to half that and say one half will spoke one language, or there's 96 different languages, then 40-minute video has to be translated into 90 plus languages. Yeah, it's going to take a bit of time to actually feed through. A lot of this information is then universal. When you look at it, it is in principle universal, because the idea is even within organisations, the upshot is knowing your divisions. Yeah, it's understanding what each division or department, segment, however it is you express it, does, what kind of role it has, and how wide its own network is, and what type of lingo it talks, especially if you're more so if you're going from business to business, and feed out the information across them. Yeah, and then it's a feedback loop there. The success of that will be based on the quality of the information, the depth of the information, whether that information in fact is, shall we say, translatable from one lingo to another. Is there a universal language across that business? Yeah, much like there was talks before through certain political avenues. Was it political or was it economics? I can't remember which it was now, but I'm almost sure it was about 2 years ago. There was talking about a new language or universal language. Like, for instance, this thing, when you look at the English being the largest, the most common language spoken, then you have others across the board. People want to keep their own languages and so on and so on and so forth, but there's a universal one. It's usually the one that's more expressive. In other words, your message does not get lost in translation. It doesn't matter how you translate it, it effectively means the same thing. You can use long words, big words, and short words. It means the same thing. Yeah, that's what this is all about. Is that I observed there was an issue from the beginning. People tried to resolve it, so the idea was, right, I will do it, right? And they will listen. No, they will listen. We do a few tests, intrinsic tests as well as extrinsic tests, to see what happens, gauge it, monitor it, gauge it again, and then carry on from there. And like I said, awkwardly, as you'll have seen, things change. Okay? Right. That being said, just simply remember that there is two parts to a conversation: talking and listening. Right? Listening, we talk about being active listening. So it's about, for instance, if I say something to you, it's like, yeah, I agree. And when you see a pause, this is where communication starts, you give feedback based on that. You understand it, or there's something relevant to show that you understand it, or you interject and add something to it. And then that conversation builds. Right? Without that, things have a tendency to just go falling flat on its face. Because the assumption is that the right side of one person's brain is automatically connecting to the other side, to the other person's right side. And it doesn't always work like that. Because a lot of people get bogged down with trying to do the wrong thing. And that creates a bit of haze. And it stops that kind of like connection. Yeah? Right. That being said, and to also iron out the quirks, the reason that these videos are not as long as they could be, and why some people have difficulty following them, is because to some it may seem a little convoluted, they seem a little bit cryptic. That's kind of like taking 20 minutes worth of music and then compressing it down into 4 minutes. Yeah? One of two things are going to happen. Yeah? It's either going to be high pitched, or it's just going to make no sense at all. It'll skip words, like speed reading. You skip words, yeah? And then it's left to you to try and figure it out. That is the general principle of it all. Because the world is based on choice, yeah? This also bears relevance when we move on to the next section. Because it's based on choice, to give direct instructions or anything like that based on what I've seen, or based on what you've seen, so it's feedback. So the general audience that is watching this, giving out information like I read through the news and so on and so forth, is telling me what's going on. Like for instance, the abortion, and the DUP has backed itself into a corner, and road maps to avoid Brexit, and the other one was the metaphysical side of things. The research states that there is something on the other side that's trying to influence, and so on. So that type of information is like you guys giving me the information, and then I bring it back and then try and feed it to the relevant areas, and then perhaps convert that into a language that is understood. So it might seem cryptic in some ways. Yeah? And because I'm fast tracking through it, that's where the convolution comes in. Yeah? So it's up to you to decide how you interpret that. Yeah? Right. Yeah, based on emails and the comments, yeah, that's pretty much the self and same thing when we start looking at it, is that some people seem to think maybe I have issues of some varying description, psychological ones or something, or there's something in my past or so on and so forth, and I'm doing these. No, none to what I'm aware of. I would like to believe that I've resolved most all of my issues. I guess the rest of them will be resolved as time goes by, because only time can really tell, hold the answers. But still, it goes to show that they're watching this and they believe they can help. Some of them are actually offering a different perspective based on what I've said. It incorporates what I've said, but they're trying to reshape it a little bit. And it's like, fair play to you. I hear you. And it can only be a good thing. Okay? Right. Communication. So this is me talking, you listening, and then I listen when it goes out. Right. Moving on to the next one, because where are we at now? 20 minutes, halfway. The next part is perspective. Right. Now, how do we deal with perspective? It's a very difficult one. Right. There's about 4 or 5 different types or examples that I can use. It also helps towards understanding coping mechanisms. Will also help with various other problems as well, as it has been throughout. Like, for instance, giving examples where we use an economic example was about national assets. When you look at it, it's a rather utilitarian perspective. It's got a 2, if not 3-fold benefit to having them. Everything from competition, stimulating competition, keeping competition fair, keeping it in check, keeping it within the prices, that is, keeping the prices within reasonable parameters, because if not, then they'll lose out, and so on and so forth. It has tax benefits, in the profit benefits when it comes back into profits when it comes back into the treasury. Tax benefits, when I talk about tax benefits, I don't mean evasion or anything like that, like they've been known to be doing. We're talking about lowering of taxes and so on and so on and so on and so forth. There's so many benefits to it. Somewhere, some people would say it's more of a communist approach or socialist approach. No. You will find it's more utilitarian because it's one of those things that benefits the many. And there it is. However, it kind of ties into when we was talking about the leadership side of things, business acumen, understanding. Right? I felt that one then. Oh, there's going to be a dig at me. No, I'm not necessarily going to have a dig at anybody. What it is a reminder, and I will go into that in a moment. And I will. There are a couple of people that will benefit from this, and they will. So, pay attention. But we start off from perspectives. Yes, it's utilitarian perspective. Most of you will probably not even know what is meant by a utilitarian perspective or utilitarianism. Reason being is it is rather complex. It has perplexed a few people. We'll get it right in a moment. It's confused a lot of people. Why? Because more often than not, people prefer to work with logical structures, right? Because it's easier to understand. It's clear, it's concise, it's to the point. Yeah, much the same with communication. Yeah. So when you start throwing something into the mix that incorporates, for argument's sake, we'll call it 50%. When you throw into the mix 50% ethics, right, things start to become rather complex because you're dealing with human emotion. Yeah? Logic is all about up here. Ethics is here. Right? But when you start to try and balance it out, what you get is logic and ethics. The argument is which comes first. Well, that's dependent on the situation, isn't it? Much the same with conversation. Listen to the conversation. Identify the problem. Yeah? Listen to what's going on. Listen to the problem, so sort of whatever's going on that causes you to listen. And automatically, instinctively, you will begin to realize which comes first. Whether it's a logical problem, therefore needing a logical solution. Same with ethical problem, needing ethical solution. However, the complexity comes in, whereas if it's a logical problem, can it be resolved with varying ethical solutions? Yeah. It's not as black and white as that, believe you me, it's not. But again, this is where active listening comes in. Personal development. Personal development is key within it all. Learning about what's going on around you, even if it's just a small circle of understanding. Yeah, we covered that in series 1 of training elements, circles. When you come to better understand that, then you will come to better understand what goes on in that circle. You can understand and identify where problems have come from and how to resolve them. But again, that's for series 2, and we're going a little bit deeper into things. To help you with perspective, there's a rounded kind of view on things. I introduced this element before, right? And it's part and parcel of virtual reality and parallels. Yeah? Virtual reality parallels. A lot of people are trying to fathom out whether we're in a universe of projections, coming inwards, creating us who we are, and other people and whatnot. There are many flaws to that kind of understanding. Coming in parallels, maybe, but that is again a matter of perspective. We already know of 2 parallels. I could, in theory, say there is in fact 24, and then times 2. So there's 48. Currently known 48 parallels. Why? Well, look at it this way. I go from one side of the map, so up here, you get any map, you go from one side to the other. You could say there's 12 if you wish, if it matters not, it doesn't. You go 24, right from one side to the other. Each one's a timeline, and a person is living in a particular timeline. So there's parallels. Yeah? Parallels of understanding. People are working on things at a different time. I say times 2 because we got the physical on one hand and metaphysical on the other hand, or whichever way you wish to look at it. Yeah? Left and right brain, all that type of stuff, you know. So metaphysical and physical, or physical, metaphysical and physical. And then you times that across time zone. So there's loads of ways of looking at it. Yeah? Again, we'll go into that much more. But to keep things into a very much realistic kind of like context, there are 7 billion people on the planet. Again, just rounding numbers. 7 billion people on the planet. How perspectives work is simply there are 7 billion different perspectives. End of story, full stop. You're all born with a preconceived idea of how you want your life to work out. There's one parallel. Now, for each time that one person interacts with another, that perspective changes somewhat. You find common ground. Right? So you create you compact 2 perspectives into one, so you get one new perspective. But then on saying that, you still remain to have 2 parallels, because 2 lives want to be independent from each other. This is why utilitarianism is important when you look at it. It was important for me anyway to bring it forward, because this is where it's come from. Yeah? And you keep doing that. For each time you add another person to that group, the number of perspectives change, and they keep compounding, in a manner of speaking, because 3 perspectives now become 1, but have 3 individual lives. Yeah, individual lives which impact the rest, and you'll keep narrowing it down. In this case, coming back to the flags, currently you're looking at nearly 200 differing perspectives. Yeah? A bit of a mind blower there, right? But there's the logical aspect to it all. The ethical aspect to it all is how that works. What is operating within that, well, just say flag, yeah? Within that group. Yeah. Then we look at things like that. So there's another way of looking at things, how things work across the world. Again, it blows some people's minds. But again, it's the world we live on. And how we've come to this point. Another way of looking at things. Two of these, I found these when I was obviously in the early days of looking up political philosophies, such as The Baby in the Woods, and another one more recent to really kind of like test people's theory or ethical basis as to how they solve a problem, is The Person on the Bridge. Now, again, a lot of it's warped to try and catch you out, to try and either debunk or devalidate a philosophy, when you can't, because for every time you try to debunk it or devalue it or anything, what you actually do is you give it presence. Right? Because the actual questions themselves are in themselves a utilitarian approach towards things. So for as long as they exist, so does it. Another perspective for you. Yeah? So what are the answers to them questions? Well, the answers will vary from person to person. You know? Again, then you'll find more people who have a common understanding. I'm certainly not looking for that at the moment. If you do share the same understanding, then great stuff. Yeah. Great minds think alike. But as I've said in the past, when answering it, you're looking at it from the ethical side of things. Because logically, we can all try and figure out a logical way to actually work something out. Yeah, it makes us feel comfortable and a sense of safety, you know, which is part of what we was talking about, coping mechanisms. But when you venture into the unknown, that's the devil is in the detail, you know. You venture into the ethical side of things. You have to seriously ask yourself questions about that scenario. Like, for instance, you're in a group and you have a baby and it's crying. What makes that more important is there's actually a group hunting you down just to agitate the situation, aggravate, and make the situation more upset for grown-ups. There's actually a group hunting you down, and the baby's giving away your position. Yeah? What do? Do you allow the baby to cry, give away your position, and sacrifice or otherwise bring harm to your group? Or do you get rid of the baby and safeguard the greater good of the group? Problem is, what you've done, what the question does, right, is it tries to place you in one or the other. And it does. Understanding perspectives, researching personal development, so on and so forth, it opens the mind to come to understand parameters in which things work, or the detailing and how things work. Now, having a child in a group is one thing. Everybody has a maternal instinct in them. Yeah? Who even knows whether the actual child belongs to one of the adults? And there in itself there's an answer, isn't there? When you start looking at them bits of information, the existence of that child, yeah, why the child's crying and so on and so on and so forth, it's not that much of a drawn out process. It sounds it because I am actually drawing it out. Right? But the mind works quicker than that. So when you're looking at the scenario, what do? Do you get rid of the child, or just let it wail and give away your position? I get a lot of people now, I get this feeling, both logically and ethically, a lot of people saying, well, you can't kill a baby. You just have to make, go with that one. And if sacrifice is the greater good, and the whole group, then, at least the baby's safe. But it won't be though, will it? What makes you think the hunting party is not interested in killing kids? What if they are? See? Already, when you look into a detail, when you look into a scenario, you begin to realise something. Now, sorry, well, you can't kill a child. You're going to have to if ever you want to survive But then, do you have to? Are you going to? Is that what you want to do? Do you reckon that's what we ought to do? I'm not leading anywhere else with this. Stick within the context. Right? I believe I know where you're going, or some of you are going with this, and I've already got that covered here. Right? I'll tell you, I'll put you out your misery. Right? I'll put you out your misery. I've already given some of the answer away. This is part and parcel of active listening. I've given some of the answer away already. Right? For those who haven't got it, don't worry about it if you didn't. It's not an issue. This is not a right or wrong thing. You know, make you it's no less, no worse, or greater, or whatever. Right? If there's a child in the group, and the fact that they're all adults, you would assume they're all adults because you've been told. There's going to be at least a parent in the group, or somebody who has much more of an empathetical personality towards children, who are more maternally instinctive. So quieten the child down. You move around a little bit while you're sitting on the child around. Once the child goes quiet, then you move further out of the way. Your hunting pattern's just completely lost your scent. Everybody's just been saved. Yeah? The flip side to it all, for those who are a little bit more ambitious, is, well, you could turn the tables. Now you've figured out how to resolve your situation. If you don't want your hunting party on you anymore, you can either do one of two things, can't you? You can either keep moving, right, and keep analysing or observing the situation to make sure it doesn't arise again, or you can retaliate. That, again, is your choice. That's what the question does. It tests your logical and ethical understanding. I could suppose you could say it's also lateral thinking as well. Do you have the ability to be able to see beyond the choices provided? Yeah? Or the choices that you've been taught. It's the same with the person on the bridge. The principle in itself, the answer is completely different. But the principles that you would use are exactly the same. Yeah? How would you resolve that? Would you go up to the person, ask them if they're alright? If you identify there's problems, well, then there's a solution to that. If not, you invite them in and move on. If not, escort them on, and then the party follows it behind. Very simple, isn't it? Nobody has to be sacrificed. Nobody has to be put at risk. It's all a matter of perspective. Yeah? When you come to identify the situation, and based on the balance between logic and ethic, or ethics, yeah, and based on your understanding, a slightly broader understanding, hence the reason for education, personal development, self-development, the more you come to understand a situation and find answers from all that you learn. Yeah, so there's two there for you already. Along with 7 billion people. Now, we covered in the last one successes and failures. Successes and failures have been known to actually lead to mental health issues, stress, and all derivatives of blind ambition or inappropriate focus or perspectives, how you communicate with people and how you acquire your successes. But then on saying that, even if you don't have a form of achievement, some people are achievement driven. You know? That being said, and if they don't achieve something, that's it, it's the end of the world. But it's not, is it? Because success, as it is in today's day and understood more profoundly, and success can be found in both your achievements and your failures. The reason they say about success in failures is about what have you learned from that failure. Yeah? Do you know what went wrong? Much the same as when we're identifying the baby in the woods or the person on the bridge. Yeah? If that person decides, oh, I've had enough, and they jump off the bridge themselves, and you've tried, and is that your fault? Deep, isn't it? It's a lot for a lot of people to actually chew on, to digest. That's why sometimes when I talk, again, and go back, sometimes it's a little bit convoluted, because it allows you to unravel that information, whether it be through sleep or through meditation or just through your working day or something, and it unravels at your pace. Right, so your successes and failures. Having a balanced approach towards it all doesn't dull out the personality in the slightest. It doesn't cause more problems. What it does do is it allows you to appreciate what not only you're doing, but other people are doing, and why these things come around. Yeah? Much the same, if we move on to the next one, is pride versus ego. Some would argue, and on one hand, rightfully so, and on the other hand, well, it's a rather moot subject, is that the same thing? What are they? Because when you start looking at other kingdoms, like for instance the animal kingdom, which is another form of parallel, it runs in parallel with us, it shares the same planet with us. You see, you don't have to be a tree hugger to understand all these things. Excuse the expression. Runs in parallel with us. Pride in itself is, by the time you've finished, let me just look at what I wrote, because I know that I put this in a particular fashion. Right, pride in itself, in a positive light, so again, perspective, your positive and your negative, your fors and your against, it's comparable to ego. Yeah, fors, against, positives, negatives. Right? You're placing pride in your work. In other words, you're effectively putting the effort in. Yeah? Fair enough, it's about, dignity, self-worth, self-empowerment, and so on and so forth. Yeah, of course it is. But how you approach that makes the ultimate difference. It is. Taking pride in your work doesn't have to be an egotistical thing. It doesn't. It takes many years to actually learn how to be egoless. Yeah? Patting yourself on the back doesn't always have to be an ego-driven thing. If nobody else is around and you've made a minor achievement, give yourself a pat on the back. Of course you do. It's like, yeah, pretty good at that. You get my point, yeah? But what we do with that is then inbuild prowess. So what we've got is kind of like the masculine and the feminine. Yeah? Pride and prowess. Right? So effectively, the skill and ability. Now, the ego in itself is just dumbing down the boasting and everything. Yeah? It's dumbing down the want to push something in somebody else's face. Yeah? They're dumbing down the blind ambition and turning it into more of a passion. There it is. So it's the difference between the positives and the negatives. Much the same as we've said before about coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms are both positive and negative. Yeah? So there's always two sides to a story in that one. And being mindful, learning, a part of your self-development in that regard, will help you to become self-aware. Yeah? Becoming self-aware will then show you which avenue to go down. The feelings that you're getting from it and the impact that you're having on other people. And then you can scale how you approach and how you don't approach. Yeah. It will also help you with, again, identifying the appropriate solution to a particular problem. Yeah. After all, it is widely understood that for every question there is an answer. For every problem there is a solution. Where they're found, actually, no, that's something else. is. Like, for instance, I'll give you a very basic one. For every nettle, stinging nettle, there'll be a dock leaf. Yeah? It may not be right next to each other. It could be a few feet away to a few miles away. Yeah? But there will always be a dock leaf about. For those who have a bit more courage, you will also understand that sometimes the solution is actually within the problem itself. Yeah? Because sometimes people can't see beyond their own nose. Right? It's not meant to be a derogatory term, it's simple social fact. Now, some people get so flustered by a problem, or a particular situation, it overwhelms them and they can't see beyond their own nose. Yeah? And then they miss these things. For a stinging nettle, you grab it from underneath, fold it in two, and you can use that to remove the barbs. Simple as that. Well, little stinging barbs, yeah. Yeah. There's loads of ways of actually looking at this, and a lot of it is down to paying attention to the environment around you. Again, you don't have to be a recluse or anything like that, or any negatives, right? Pay attention. Actively listen. Yeah? What is going on, and then communicate that back. Yeah? Granted, there could be language barriers, but again, we've already addressed that. That is a matter of choice, and if they want to learn by that, then granted, it could take me days to translate it all. But if people want to know it enough, then they will either translate it into their own language or learn a more expressive language. But it's arguable whether the English language is more expressive, but it is more commonly used than most people think, because you can, in actual theory, be much more complex and explain things in a much more clearer context. Yeah, of what is actually going on. Yeah. Now, that being said, right, do we do that one first, or do we do that one to finish up? What are we on? We've gone over slightly, so my apologies for those who have stuck with us. Right. Right. The next two elements are based on human rights, which is, again, the ethical side of things. But at the same token, there are one's a logical problem and the other one's an ethical problem. Right? So we're going to try and feed these two out at the same time. One of them is the universal basic income, or UB, as a lot of people are referring to it as. You have to ask yourself the question, right? Is a universal basic income really a human right? Right? This is one I'm going to leave this one as a question for you. Then we'll move on to the next one. Right? Universal basic income. When looking at human rights, when you're looking at self-worth, dignity, empowerment, yada yada, and the rest that goes with it, is the UB really an actual human right? Or is it simply an economic and social development, or a process of social and economic development? Yeah? Bearing in mind, I already have ideas on actually how to work this lot out. And for those who are concerned about, well, you say that's this and that's that, my apologies, all in good time. Right? It will all come to pass. Remember, building things up. There's no point me just throwing stuff at you, philosophies and prophecies and answers to this question and solutions to this problem, because by the time you finish, well, where the bloody hell does this start? Where do I start with it, and where does it finish? Yeah? You bog yourself down. So UB, is it really a human right, or is it simply a process of economic and social development? And then how do you do it? Yeah? see what you can do with that one, that question, and then we can then build up to giving answers. Right, now on sensitive issue, the ethical problem when it comes down to abortions. Right, the DUP, granted, it's their problem, they should deal with it. It's rather a cast-off when you look at it from that perspective, but remembering DUP, Democratic Unionist Party. The answer in itself is democratic. You're working as a unity or a union or a party. It's rather kind of like a dual term there, but democracy being core element, the part up front, they've decided 60+% have decided that abortion laws should be relaxed. So by the time you're finished, where's the problem? The problem in itself is behind the ethical side of it all, which is found within religion, faith. Right? Go forth and multiply. But as we pointed out before, one is that is now not becoming too relevant. More so because there are 7 billion people on the planet. There are not enough resources to go around now. Yeah? When you start looking at it, you start looking at human rights, there's two ways of looking at it. Yeah? One of which is simply put, is that yes, it is a human right when you're looking at the right to bear children. Right? However, is it a human right to actually have more than you're capable of bringing up? Yeah? There's an ethical conundrum for you. Yeah? What else did I... Right, and the other side of it all is self-awareness, which will help you with the actual problem itself. Now personally, people 60+% have said relax them, you relax them. When you're talking about for major risks to health and life, that's it. At the end of the day, if people are having children and they have second thoughts and it's not going to work for them, you are indeed actually putting a risk to their health and lifestyle. Yeah? And so on and so forth. And we can broaden on that if needs be. I'm sure somebody already has. However, the self-awareness side of things, to really actually pad your conundrum out with many different perspectives. Right. We've already said bearing children and how many or any at all. Right. You have the right to bear children. That is a human right. That is innate. It's instinctive. It is you. Right. How many is another thing. There it is. In this day and age, you have to seriously ask yourself the question, can you support 2, 3, 4, 9, 12, however fertile you are, right? Can you support it? Or is everybody else having to support them? There in itself is all an already existing issue. Who makes the choice and on what terms? A sentient certain terms for a sentient being to live or die. Yeah? I've heard this one rattle around the system a fair few times. That in itself, with risking, should I say, of actually sounding rather callous, and it's not meant that way, it just simply, this is what happens when logic and ethics melds together. Right? The one that actually gets the decision, to make the decision, is the self-awareness, is the one with the greatest level of self-awareness. Now, whilst a baby in itself, going through the trimesters, develops in its state of consciousness, yeah, and its sensitivity and so on and so on and so forth, it is not holistically or overly self-aware. So therefore, it doesn't actually know what's going on. It will feel pain, much like any animal does. Humans do, and so on and so forth. But it's the awareness of oneself, the whys and the what fors, and so on and so forth. So when you're looking at that conundrum, self-awareness is the actual gauging point. This is the defining element within it all. So the upshot is of all within all of this is, if a person's situation, whether it adheres to the parameters set by major risk to health or life, you're looking at health and health well-being when you're talking about human rights, health and well-being, life and lifestyle. Yeah, all of that. Then, when you increase the parameters by twofold, you then start to actually identify the pestle model, the social models, the political models, yeah, or the political models, economic, religion, environmental, you know what I'm talking about, right? You begin to identify that, and by the time you've actually folded back around again, it is in fact self-awareness. It is an awareness of oneself and one's environment, and the impact that that one environment and oneself has on others. If not, that one environment that's external to yours has had an impact on yours. Yeah. By the time you've finished, both logically and ethically, based on periods and timelines, social progression and social awareness, it's time to move on. Allow it to happen. Remember, it's your choice. Yeah, it's your choice. But the people have spoken. We're not trying to interfere, but point out that you chose a democratic system, and everybody's given sound reasons so far as to why they would do it. Yeah. It also kind of stops people from having to disappear across to other countries for it, because they believe strongly that it's not for them. Yeah, but somebody keeps stopping them. A bit like an oppressive force, isn't it? When you think about it, it's like yeah, it's just an oppressive force. Yeah. Just time to move on. Right, I have kept you for an hour. For those who have had the resolve to hang around long enough, thank you. It's appreciated. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. There it is. Sometimes they do drag on a little bit longer than what I would like them to. Yeah. On a final note, realistically, and piecing all of this all together so as not to take any more of your time, leadership is a big thing within all realms of understanding within the pestle model. Right. I did say right from the beginning that somebody with more economic knowledge, a bit more prowess, so on and so forth, would be an ideal candidate to be able to lead a country. Yes, I did, and I still stand by that. However, who you choose to place in power based on that understanding will define the difference. Now, I'm not going against anybody, because some people do bring unorthodox views. Sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. Hopefully, particular individuals realise that things can be rather awkward. Their approach is not always suitable for all the types of arenas. You have to learn to be able to be flexible. And again, like I was saying before, on the right side of things, knowing how to gauge your environment, how you apply yourself, and how much you don't. Like somebody with their handshakes. It's like a handshake. Even putting persons aside, it is like a handshake. A soppy fish. Some people just don't know how to shake a hand. But at the same token, it's about not breaking the hand as well. It's understanding when somebody's gripping your hand, what are they trying to do? Now, a lot of this has been explained through the media already, so I don't have to go into it. But the principal understanding within that approach is the same. It is. It's knowing how far to apply yourself. Now, as it stands, when we start looking across a career and whatnot, and various other peninsulas, and various other countries, they are beginning to work things out, and I hope it is for the better and it's not a ruse. I'm not saying it is a ruse, I'm saying I hope it's not, for your benefit in the long term. Like I was saying about when it comes down to Israel, around Iraq and whatnot, you're wanting to build your economies up and whatnot, and the West's influencing you, and some would argue you're oppressing you and all that through sanctions and so on and so forth. Now, bearing in mind, the same principle again applies, and it's how you address that within your own cultural development. There it is. When it comes down to the nuclear weapons, feeling safe is about having a bigger stick, as it keeps being said in some films. Yeah. So reevaluate how you approach the situation. Realistically speaking, when you look at the West, remember I'm coming from a central point of view, so a utilitarian perspective. It just happens to be that I'm on the West, but I'm not actually central, straight down GMT. Right? The West is perceivably oppressing you, but seriously though, ask yourself why. What is it they're doing? Why are they doing it? Why is what you're doing is so offensive to a broader network? And it's not about the superpowers or anything like that. It's about trading, isn't it? And like I was saying in one or two of the other videos, the second to last one about last one wasn't it? About the development of your economies and tourism and whatnot. Yeah, and how you deal with terrorism and so on and so on and so forth. Again, through communication networks. It is learning about your environment. So again, it's a matter of perspective. Yeah? Your perspective will be governed by what you know and how you understand it. It's based on your interpretation of your environment and the broader circles thereafter. Yeah? It's going to be hard. It is hard. But then, what good ever came from it being easy? Yeah? Sometimes being convoluted and cryptic holds its benefits because it gets the brain working. And it does. Sometimes it can feel tiring. But at the same token, it's also rewarding. Okay? Some people will make mistakes on their travels. But that's the whole idea of it all, is succeeding and failing. It may not be a failure outright. It may be just simply it doesn't work, or a portion of it doesn't work. So you reevaluate the portion to make the bigger thing work, the bigger picture work. Yeah? I know. Right. We've had an hour. Bugger off. Enjoy the rest of your day. Like I say, I'm trying to stick to monthly. I've had one or two technical issues. It's what comes from aging equipment. I try to make the most of what I've got. Then if it completely falls flat on its face, then yeah, I replace it, unless it can be repaired. Then I move on from there. Yeah. So again, my apologies for the delay, and I will be back again soon. As you may find, there may be another one at the end of this month. That will depend on how quick the information feeds back around. It also depends on what happens within my day. I'm just living my life in the same way everybody else is. I just get on with things and go in with the flow. Right. Right. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining me and listening in. Those who are brave enough, most of those who are brave enough to stick around. And I will be back again soon.